The station was quiet the way it usually was around 4 in the morning. Most of the guys were stretched out on recliners, lights dim. TV running low with some overnight news loop nobody was really watching. Coffee sat heavy in the air. The kind of hour where everyone moved slow but stayed half ready, knowing a tone could drop at any second. Mike Dalton was leaning at the kitchen counter, warming his hands around a mug he didn't really need. 20 years on the job and he still liked the ritual, something steady before the shift really kicked in. Rain had come through earlier, leaving the pavement outside dark and glossy under the security lights. He glanced toward the bay doors, the engine sitting like a sleeping animal, quiet for now. He didn't expect the call. Nobody ever expects the one that hits close. The alert hit sharp, a tone that cuts through walls and ribs the same way every time. Voices lifted in the bunkroom. Someone cursed awake. Mike set the mug down and stepped toward the radio speaker as the dispatcher's voice came through fast, clipped. All business. Structure fire. Possible entrapment. Hillside Drive near Ridge Court. Caller reporting smoke visible from roofline. Mike froze just long enough to feel it hit. Hillside Drive, his street. That was his street. Then everything inside him kicked back into gear. Turnout coat off the rack, boots on, hood up. He moved the same way he always did, only with a pressure behind his ribs he'd felt maybe twice in his whole career. The crew climbed into the engine. Manny driving, Torres behind him, Jacobson checking the pack. Nobody noticed Mike's hands tense on the grab bar. Not yet. As the garage door lifted, the cool air pushed into the cab. The engine rolled out, red lights bouncing off the wet pavement, siren rising. Mike leaned forward, looking through the windshield like distance could settle him. But every block they drove shaved down the space between professional focus and personal panic. Hillside wasn't far, maybe 3-4 minutes with lights and sirens. He could already picture the houses, same split levels and ranches he saw walking his dog after dinner. Good people, old retirees, young families, folks he talked to about nothing important. A normal street. Dispatch came back on. Caller unable to confirm occupants. Neighbor believes residents are home. Manny glanced over. That your neighborhood? Mike kept his eyes forward. Close enough. The closer they got, the more he felt that quiet dread. Not the dramatic kind, the real kind. The kind where your body knows before your mind catches up. Smoke hung low over the next intersection, drifting like a thin gray sheet under the streetlights. They turned onto Hillside. That confirmed it. Thick smoke, heavy, rolling off a house 3 doors down from Mike's own. He'd helped that family bring in a new grill last summer. The dad, Evan, had cracked a beer open for him right there in the driveway. Jesus, Torres said under his breath. Let's go, Mike snapped louder than he meant. The engine stopped short of the driveway. Everyone moved. Mike hit the ground running, grabbing the first line with Jacobson. The heat was already pushing out of the front windows. Glass cracked but still holding. The roofline glowed faint orange through the smoke, flames licking somewhere in the attic. Neighbors stood out in the street, mostly in pajamas, faces washed in the rotating red lights. Someone yelled Mike's name, but he didn't look. He couldn't. He focused on the front door. That was the job. That was the only thing that mattered. Manny forced the entry tool into Mike's hands. You good? Mike nodded once. Not because he felt good, because he had to be. They hit the door hard, wood splintering under the irons. Smoke spilled out in a thick wave, hot and bitter. Mike dropped low, sweeping with his light, listening for anything. Movement, coughing, anything that meant someone was still inside. He stepped over the threshold, and the house he'd stood in a dozen times. Super Bowl parties, holiday drop-ins, quick chats. Felt like another world now. Dark, roaring, alive in the worst way. He pushed forward, line in hand, heart punching harder than he wanted. He called out, "Fire department, if you can hear me, call out." Only the fire answered. Mike pressed forward anyway. Mike moved deeper into the house, staying low. The smoke pushed at him like a tide, thick and fast moving, rolling across the floor in dirty layers. His light cut thin tunnels through it, never reaching far enough. Heat worked down from the ceiling, building with every second. Jacobson stayed at his shoulder, feeding the line inch by inch. "Living room's open," he said, voice muffled through the mask. "Stairs should be right ahead." Mike nodded. He knew the layout without thinking. Couch on the left, small hallway leading to the bedrooms, kitchen off the back. He'd eaten chili here once during a football game. Everything looked different now. Shapes warped, colors washed out by the smoke. They advanced until their gloves brushed the edge of the coffee table. The wood was already hot. "Fire's in the attic for sure," Jacobson said, looking up. The rafters above them crackled in steady pops, sharp and quick, like someone stepping on dry twigs. Mike scanned the hallway. The smoke was heavier there, almost solid. That's where the bedrooms were, that's where anyone sleeping would still be. "We pushed down the hall," Mike said. They crawled forward. Torres and Manny stayed behind them, setting fans, preparing ventilation, checking for extension. The whole house felt like it was shrinking around them. Heat tightening, air thinning, visibility dropping to almost nothing. A faint sound carried through the smoke. Not fire, not structure noise. Softer, uneven. Mike stopped. "You hear that?" They froze. The sound came again, muffled, weak, somewhere ahead and to the right. "Bedroom," Mike said. They followed the wall, advancing faster now. The line scraped along the carpet. The smoke lifted just enough for their lights to catch a doorframe. Mike pushed it open with his shoulder. The room flashed into view in jerky pieces. Dresser, scattered toys. A framed poster half melted on the wall. Smoke curled down the walls in long black streaks. And on the floor near the foot of the bed, a shape. Small. A child. Mike's breath stuttered inside the mask. He moved instantly, crossing the room in 3 steps. The kid was curled on their side, arms tucked close, unconscious, but breathing shallow and fast. "Got one," Mike called. "Kid, maybe 7 or 8. Jacobson was already clearing a path behind him. Torchlight hit the ceiling just long enough to reveal a puff of flame breaking through the drywall seams. They were running out of time. Mike swept the child up, keeping them tight to his chest, head shielded. The kid made a soft sound, barely there, but alive. "Go," Jacobson said. They turned back toward the hall just as a deep groan rolled through the structure. Long, heavy, the kind that tells every firefighter exactly what's about to happen. The attic fire had eaten enough of the supports. "Ceiling's coming down," Torres shouted from outside the doorway. Mike dropped low, almost crouching as he moved. Debris rained down, the first pieces light, then heavier. The heat surged, pushing against his shoulders. They pushed into the hallway, and a section of ceiling collapsed behind them with a violent crash. Sparks spilling across the floor like burning gravel. The path back to the living room stayed clear, barely. "Move! Move!" Manny yelled from the entry. Mike kept the kid's head tucked in tight. He could feel the child's breath faint and quick against his jacket. Every instinct in him sharpened. The kind of focus you don't get from training or years on the job, just something deeper. They made the turn into the living room. Fresh air rushed in from the open door. Manny reached out, grabbing Mike's arm to steady him as more debris hit the floor behind them. "Go! Get outside!" Manny barked. Mike didn't stop moving until he hit the yard. Night air hit his face shield, cool and clean. The kid stirred weakly against him. Paramedics were already running up with a stretcher. One of them, a young medic named Harris, helped guide the child out of Mike's arms. "We'll take it from here." Mike nodded, breath still shaking inside the mask. Neighbors were watching from the sidewalk, silent now, faces pale in the rotating lights. And that's when one of them, Mrs. Hanley from across the street, stepped forward, eyes wide. "Mike, the parents, I didn't see them come out." The words hit harder than the heat had. Mike looked back at the house, the roof now belching thick smoke, flames pushing harder every minute. The kid was only the first, and 2 more people were still inside. Mike didn't wait for anyone to say it. The second the paramedics pulled the child clear, he turned back toward the front door. The heat pouring out had changed. Stronger, heavier, picking up that deep rolling sound that meant the attic fire was pushing into full involvement. Torres saw the look in his eyes. "We go together," he said, already pulling a fresh tool. "Jake, stay on the line," Mike ordered. "We'll need that water fast." They regrouped at the doorway. The visibility inside had dropped to almost zero. Thick black smoke pulsed out in steady bursts, like the house was breathing wrong. Manny leaned in. "Command says make 1 more primary. If it gets unstable, you bail." "Copy," Mike said, though the word felt thin. They pushed in. The living room was hotter than before. Radiant heat that pushed through gear, slow and punishing. They dropped low, crawling fast. The ceiling above them crackled in a steady, dangerous rhythm. Another collapse wasn't far off. "The parents' room is back left." Mike said. "They sleep with the door closed." They navigated toward the hallway again. This time, the smoke was so dense it felt physical, like crawling through wet cement. Every foot forward took effort. Every breath through the mask tasted hotter. "Sound off," Torres yelled. "If anyone can hear us, answer." Nothing. No movement. No coughing. No voices. Just the fire, chewing through the structure above them. They reached the master bedroom door. It was half open, the edges scorched. Mike pushed it with his glove. The hinges groaned. The room inside looked like a cave. Dark, flooded with smoke. Flashlight beams flattening into fog. He swept the bed. Empty. "Torch left wall," Mike said. Torres scanned. "Clear there." Mike shifted forward, sweeping the floor near the far side of the bed. That's when his hand brushed something that wasn't carpet. Fabric. He dropped lower. A figure, curled sideways, adult male, Evan. "Got him," Mike shouted. "Unconscious." They pulled him out from behind the bed. No obvious burns, but his breathing was shallow, irregular. The smoke had gotten him deep. "Where's his wife?" Torres said. "She'd be close," Mike answered. "They always—" A small sound cut him off. A cough. Weak. They froze. Mike turned his light toward the adjoining bathroom. The doorway was half blocked by a fallen cabinet. Smoke poured through the gap at floor level. "She's in there," Mike said, already moving. They heaved the cabinet aside. The bathroom was hotter than the bedroom, the air inside shimmering. Steam mixed with smoke. The fire had already chewed into the walls behind the tiles. She was on the floor, one hand still hooked around the base of the vanity, like she had tried to pull herself up. Her eyes fluttered when Mike touched her shoulder. "Ma'am, we've got you," he said, though she probably couldn't hear anything through the mask and the roar overhead. They checked her airway, quick and practiced. She was breathing, but unsteady. Not much time left. "Torres, take Evan," Mike said. "I'll take her." "Copy." They repositioned, each taking one of the adults. But when they turned back toward the hallway, the situation had changed. The roof had dropped lower. Smoke was pushing downward in fast pulses. Classic signs of imminent flashover. The heat in the hallway felt like opening an oven door, only constant and rising. "Move now!" Jacobson yelled from farther down the line. "Ceiling's failing!" Mike shifted the woman into a better carry and started forward. Torres did the same with Evan. They moved in practiced sync, but the house wasn't giving them any favors. Another section of ceiling sagged, then crashed down behind them. A wall of sparks blew across the hall. "Keep going!" Manny shouted from the entry. 10 feet! The last stretch felt longer than the entire search. Smoke blinded everything. The only guide was the line under Mike's glove and the faint glow of the doorway ahead. They broke into the living room just as another collapse hit the back half of the house. The heat chased them like a wave. Manny grabbed Torres's turnout and pulled him through. Mike pushed out last, half carrying, half dragging the woman into the night air. They made it 2 yards from the porch before the entire front window blew outward, fire rolling across the front of the house in a massive flare. Neighbors gasped. Someone started crying. Mike laid the woman on the grass. Harris and the medics swept in immediately. Torres placed Evan next to her, chest rising shallowly but steady. "Both alive?" Mike asked. "For now," Harris said. "You bought them time." Mike nodded, but his lungs felt tight. His hands were shaking harder than he liked. Not fear, dumped adrenaline maybe, but it made him feel older than his years. Behind him, the house burned hard, fire stretching out the windows, roofline collapsing in sections. The kind of fire no crew could have stopped from the inside. Torres stepped up beside him. "Hell of a pull, Mike." He didn't answer. He was staring at the street. His neighbors. People he saw every day, now watching their block lit up like a disaster zone. And then he realized something else was moving toward him fast. Someone running. A teenager. Evan and Lisa's older daughter, 15 maybe. She must have been at a friend's house for the night. She saw the medics working on her parents and froze, breath catching, hands shaking, and Mike knew exactly what was about to hit her. The girl stopped short on the wet pavement, sneakers skidding a little. Her eyes locked on the 2 medics working over her parents. All the noise around her, radios, engines, the roar of the fire, seemed to fall away. She stood frozen, breathing fast, lips trembling but not making a sound. Mike stepped toward her, still catching his own breath. Steam lifted off his turnout coat. His hands shook just enough that he hid them against his sides. Emily. he said, keeping his voice low. "Come here." She didn't move at first. Her eyes were locked onto her mother, who was surrounded by equipment she didn't understand. Oxygen mask, monitors, IV kit laid out on the grass. The medics worked in steady, practiced motions, but to Emily, it must have looked like chaos. "Is she—" Her voice cracked mid-sentence. "Is she alive?" "Yes," Mike said. "Both of them. They're in rough shape, but the medics have them." She finally walked toward him, steps unsteady, like the ground might shift under her. When she got close enough, she looked him up and down. Soot smeared across his gear, helmet scuffed, mask hanging off the side. Something in her expression changed, like she just realized he'd been inside the house she grew up in. "You went in for them," she said, almost whispering. Mike kept his tone steady. "We went in. That's the job." Her breath shook. "My brother, did you get him out?" "Yeah," Mike said. "He's already on the way to the hospital." She nodded, eyes wet but holding it together. Strong kid. He'd seen her riding her bike past his house 100 times, earbuds in, backpack bouncing. Now she stood like someone who had just aged 5 years in 5 minutes. A paramedic jogged over. "Harris again. We're transporting both parents. They need to go now." Emily turned sharply. "Can I ride with them?" "We'll bring you in another unit," Harris said. "I promise you won't be far behind." Emily looked at Mike again, searching for something. Reassurance, maybe just someone steady to focus on. He gave her a small nod. Not a promise, just a grounding point. As she followed the medics, Torres came up beside him. His gear was streaked black, helmet dented from the collapse. "Command wants us to rotate out for rehab. Get vitals checked." Mike didn't argue. His pulse was still running high, and the world had started to feel a little too bright at the edges. He followed the crew toward the medic tent set up near the engine. They sat on a long bench, masks off, jackets hanging open to vent heat. A rehab tech clipped monitors onto Mike's finger, then wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his arm. "Heart rate's climbing back down," the tech said. "How you feeling?" Mike nodded. "Fine. Any dizziness, chest tightness, trouble breathing?" "No." The tech watched him for a few seconds, clearly not convinced. "You did 2 rescues in high heat. That's a lot even for seasoned guys." Mike didn't respond. His eyes drifted back to the burning structure. The roof was nearly gone now. Flames pushed out of every window. The fire looked brighter against the dark street, reflecting off the wet asphalt. The house didn't look like a place he recognized anymore. Manny walked over, carrying 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Mike. "Hell of a morning." "Yeah," Mike said quietly. "You holding up?" "Doing what I can." Manny nodded, not pushing. He'd been on the job almost as long as Mike. He understood the difference between a rough call and a personal one. After a minute, the battalion chief approached them. "Fire's defensive now. Good work on the rescues. All 3 victims are en route." Mike nodded, but the chief wasn't finished. "You took a risk going back for that secondary search," the chief said, not angry, just stating it plainly. "Couldn't leave without knowing," Mike said. The chief studied him for a moment. "I know it's your neighborhood. That complicates things." Mike didn't answer. Not because he didn't have an answer, just because everything felt heavier than it should. "You did your job," the chief continued, "and you did it well. Don't let the rest drag you under." The chief walked off. Torres sighed next to him. "He's trying, you know." "I know." They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Jacobson, who'd been quiet since they left the house, finally spoke up. "Hey, Mike, look at this." He pointed toward the street. Neighbors had gathered in small knots, talking in low voices. Some were crying, some were filming, some were just staring at the house like they didn't know what to do with their hands. But down near the next intersection stood one figure Mike recognized instantly. His wife, still in pajamas, hair tied back, coat thrown over her shoulders, walking fast toward him with a look he knew too well, fear she didn't want to show. And Mike realized he hadn't called her, hadn't texted, hadn't done anything except run into someone else's burning house 3 doors down. She reached him out of breath. "Mike," she said, voice tight. "Jesus, are you okay?" He opened his mouth to answer, but for the first time all night he didn't know what to say. For a second, everything around Mike seemed to blur. The engines, the smoke column rising over the rooftops, the chatter on radios, even the glow from what was left of the house. His wife stood in front of him, arms tense around herself. eyes searching his face like she was checking for injuries she couldn't see. "I'm okay," Mike said finally, though his voice came out rougher than he wanted. "I'm here." She let out a shaky breath and stepped closer, one hand landing on his arm where the turnout coat was still warm. "I woke up to sirens and saw the lights through the window. When I realized it was our street," her voice broke before she tightened it again. "You didn't answer your phone." "I was inside," Mike said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward the burning structure. "In there?" "Yeah." She closed her eyes for a second like she needed to steady herself. "I know it's your job. I know. But seeing all this and not knowing," she stopped again, swallowing hard. "It's different when it's right here. It's different when it's our neighbors." Mike didn't argue. She was right. Being out on a highway, a warehouse, an apartment building, it all felt distant, manageable, professional. But this was walking distance. This was people whose mailboxes he saw every day. He took another breath, let it settle, then said, "We got all three out. The kid, Evan, Lisa. They were still breathing when we brought them out." Her shoulders loosened just a little. "Are they going to be okay?" "I don't know yet," he said. "They're getting the best chance they can." She nodded, eyes glassy but steady. "I saw their daughter, Emily." She looked lost. "Yeah," Mike said quietly. "She's headed to the hospital soon." His wife stepped in closer, lowering her voice. "When everything calms down, we should check on her. The family will need people around them." Mike nodded. That part was easier to think about than the rest. Behind them, one of the engines repositioned to hit the remaining hotspots. The water stream cut through the flames with a heavy, rhythmic sound. A drone from the department flew overhead, sending thermal images back to command. His wife squeezed his arm one more time. "I'll be at the house. Come home when you're released." "I will." She hesitated, wanting to say more, deciding against it, then stepped back and walked down the street, weaving through neighbors and parked units. Mike watched her go until she turned the corner toward their home. When he turned back, Torres was standing a few feet away, arms crossed, expression somewhere between tired and faintly amused. "Man," Torres said. "She walked up like she was about to pull you out of the fire herself." Mike shook his head. "Wouldn't put it past her." "Good to have someone who worries," Torres said. "Not everyone gets that." Mike didn't answer, but he knew what Torres meant. Plenty of firefighters had marriages that didn't survive the job. Others kept distance from their families to avoid this kind of fear spilling over. Mike had always tried to balance both worlds. Nights like this made that line feel razor thin. Command called out over the radios again. "Crews, continue overhaul. Collapse risks still high. Watch your footing." Jacobson tapped Mike's shoulder. "You up for assisting or you need more rehab time?" "I'm good," Mike said. "Let's finish what we started." They geared back up, not full pack, just helmets and gloves, and walked toward what was left of the house. The fire had eaten through the roof, leaving jagged beams that stuck up like broken ribs. Steam rose in thick waves, every step squished in soaked debris. Manny was pulling apart what remained of the front wall. "Watch the footing," he said. "Floors soft on the left side." Mike nodded and helped with clearing out hot spots. They worked in a slow, controlled rhythm. Pull, spray, check for extension, repeat. The adrenaline had long since drained out, replaced with a heavy tiredness that clung to his limbs. As they moved deeper into the living room, now just a charred skeleton of walls, Mike saw something half buried under debris. A picture frame, glass missing, edges scorched. He bent to pick it up. Evan, Lisa, their two kids, taken on a beach somewhere. Sunlight, smiles, normal life. Jacobson glanced over his shoulder. Rough seeing stuff like that. "Yeah," Mike said, wiping soot from the glassless front. "Reminds you what's at stake. Reminds you what you pulled out of here," Jacobson said. "Don't lose sight of that." Mike didn't answer. He just set the frame on the edge of the driveway, out of the debris field where the family could find it later. A few minutes later, command came over the radio again. "All right, crews. Overhaul complete. Pack up. Debrief in 10. The team made their way back toward the engine, exhausted and quiet. The sun was starting to rise now, a faint blue-gray stretching over the horizon, the kind of morning that made everything look colder. Mike set his gear down beside the rig and took a long breath. His muscles ached. His throat burned from the hot air. His head felt heavy from everything that had happened in the past hour and a half. Torres sat beside him on the tailboard. "You know," he said, I've been on this job 13 years. I've never had a fire on my own street. Mike nodded. Hope you never do. Feels different? Yeah, Mike said quietly. More real. They sat there in silence, listening to the engines idle, watching the last of the steam drifting off the wrecked house. Then Manny walked up. Chief wants us at the station after debrief. Paperwork, statement, the whole thing. Figured, Mike said. As the crew gathered, someone from command spoke softly next to him. We've got word from the hospital. All 3 are stable. Critical, but stable. Mike closed his eyes for a second. Relief didn't hit like a wave. It landed slow, like weight shifting off his shoulders 1 inch at a time. When he opened his eyes again, the sun had finally broken over the rooftops. Another day starting. But this one felt different. The debrief at the station ran longer than anyone wanted, the kind of slow, methodical review that followed every working fire. Command walked them through the timeline. Radio calls, interior conditions, rescue actions. Every detail laid out so nothing was missed. Necessary but draining. Mike sat through it quietly. His gear still smelled like smoke even after they'd scrubbed down. His eyes burned. His body felt heavier than it had in months. The chief wrapped up with a firm nod. Good work today. 3 viable victims from a fully involved structure is no small thing. Go home. Rest. We'll update you when we hear more from the hospital. The crew dispersed from the training room in slow waves. Manny clapped Mike on the shoulder on his way out. Get some rest, brother, Torres added. And maybe, I don't know, try not to run into any more houses on your own street for a while. Mike managed a tired smirk. I'll keep that in mind. The station quieted as the morning shift took over. Mike changed into his off-duty clothes, gathered the last of his gear, and stepped out into the cool air. The sun was higher now, bright enough to reflect off the engine bay windows. A normal morning for everyone else in the county. Not for him. The drive home was short. Too short, really. He wasn't sure what he expected to feel turning onto his street. Maybe dread, maybe some kind of emotional recoil. But all he felt was a strange emptiness. Kind of quiet that settled in the spaces where adrenaline had burned itself out. As he rolled slowly past the burned house, now cordoned off with tape, the smell hit him again. Wet ash. Charred wood. It would linger for weeks. Some neighbors stood outside talking, pointing quietly at the wreckage. Others just stared at him as he drove by, expressions a mix of gratitude and shock. He pulled into his driveway. His wife waited on the front steps with a blanket over her shoulders and a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. The moment he got out of the truck, she walked straight to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He leaned into it, letting the warmth settle him. You look exhausted, she said. I am. They stepped inside the house. His dog, usually loud, usually bouncing, just patted over gently like it sensed something different. Mike scratched its head, dropped his gear bag by the hallway door and sat at the kitchen table. His wife poured him coffee. Hospital called, she said. Emily wanted you to know they're all still stable. Her mom is in the ICU but responding. Her dad's on oxygen, her little brother's awake. Mike blinked, surprised. Awake? Yeah, she said softly. Asked where his parents were. He nodded, letting that settle. That small piece of good news felt bigger than he expected. You want to go see them? She asked. Later, he said. They need their family first and He paused, rubbing his forehead. I need a minute before going back into all that. She sat beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. Take whatever time you need. For a while, they didn't talk. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of distant street traffic. A normal morning soundscape. Familiar. Safe. Eventually, his wife said, You know, you always tell me the job is unpredictable, but watching you walk into a fire 3 doors down, it makes the unpredictability feel a lot closer. Mike nodded. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't stand there and wait. Not when I knew who lived there. You saved them. We saved them, he corrected. All of us. She smiled slightly. Still proud of you. He rested his hands around the warm mug. It hits different when it's this close. That's why I'm proud. They stayed like that for a long moment, sharing the quiet. Later that afternoon, after a shower and a few hours of sleep that felt more like drifting than resting, Mike stood at the window. The burned house down the street looked smaller somehow. Still blackened, still broken, but no longer threatening. Just the shell of a bad morning. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Hi, Mr. Dalton, it's Emily. Thank you. For all of it. Mike stared at the screen for a few seconds, then typed back, "You're welcome. Your family fought hard. They'll get through this." Another message came through almost immediately. My brother asked who pulled him out. Mom did too. I told them it was you. Mike exhaled slowly, a long, deep breath that felt like something releasing inside his chest. He typed, "Tell them the whole crew did. They weren't alone." Emily sent back a simple, "I know." Mike set the phone down, looked out at the quiet street, and let the weight of the day settle into something he could hold without breaking. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't looking for recognition. He'd just been a firefighter doing what firefighters do, step into the smoke, not away from it. But today had been different, closer, sharper, a reminder that emergencies don't care where you live or who you love. He took another breath, steadier now. Another day would come, another shift, another tone dropping at a time no one expected. And when it came, he'd answer, same as always. But he'd never forget the morning the call came from his own street, the morning that made him remember exactly why he still put on the gear, and exactly what it meant to bring someone home alive.